Unveiling ancient Rome. From foul odors to high-rise living. Did you know that the most pungent liquid in ancient Rome cost more than perfume? Or how many types of marriage existed back then? Was it true that Roman women had no personal names? And what was the reward for giving birth to 3 children? Prepare to be surprised as we delve into a world where boar manure was used in medicine and goat hair on the face was a sign of intellect. And if you read to the end, you'll discover what they used instead of laundry detergent. The many faces of marriage, from indissoluble bonds to marriage by habit. Unlike our modern 2 primary forms of marriage, ancient Rome boasted a far greater variety. Formal legal registration, as we know it, didn't exist. Marriage was essentially an agreement between 2 families. The most stringent form was the marriage consecrated by the confariatio rite. Popular among patricians, it was considered indissoluble. A woman, previously her father's property, literally became the husband's property, and their children belonged to the father. The woman's rights to property were severely limited, and she couldn't manage the family budget. For common Romans, the coemptio marriage was simpler. In the presence of at least 5 witnesses, the groom symbolically purchased the bride, and she again became his property. However, divorce was easier. Simply announcing it in front of 7 witnesses was enough. Furthermore, the wife's father could unilaterally dissolve the marriage at his whim. Another type was the so-called marriage by habit, usus. This method prevented children from immediately becoming the husband's property. A couple could simply declare they were living together and were now a family. In this case, ownership of the woman transferred to the man only after a year of cohabitation. To avoid this, 3 days before the year was up, she would temporarily move back to her parents, and the count would restart. If a wife's infidelity was the reason for divorce, she was no longer allowed to remarry. This rule didn't apply to men. They were permitted to have mistresses or lovers. However, Roman citizens couldn't marry their beloved hetairai, courtesans, first cousins, or non-Romans. Widows and divorced women were required to remarry within 6 months, and later within a year. Garum, a foul-smelling delicacy priced above perfume. Ancient Rome's most pungent liquid was paradoxically also its most expensive. Garum, an incredibly foul-smelling fish sauce. According to Pliny the Elder, no other liquid, apart from perfumes, cost more. As per Apicius's cookbook, garum was an ingredient in most recipes and often replaced salt for cooks. It was made from fish blood and entrails through a fermentation process lasting several months. The sauce had such a potent stench that its preparation was forbidden within city limits. Finished garum was sealed in small vessels and supplied to Roman provinces. Incidentally, one theory suggests that the magic potion of the Gauls, Asterix and Obelix, was precisely this garum. Romans adopted it from the Gauls, who gave it to their soldiers before long marches and battles, believing it possessed miraculous properties. Biologist and anthropologist Piers Mitchell speculates that garum was the cause of widespread intestinal parasite infections in ancient Rome. Roman high-rises in country villas. Most Roman families lived in multi-story apartment buildings called insulae. The higher the floor, the poorer the residence. While ground floor apartments could be up to 2,000 square feet, the upper floors often contained tiny rooms, sometimes even without windows. Running water and heating were only available on the lower floors. The others warmed themselves with braziers, which frequently led to these buildings catching fire. Only some buildings offered a toilet for wealthier tenants, and usually just one per floor. Wealthy Romans lived in country estates called domus. A domus was a large, comfortable home that easily accommodated the owner's shop, a library, bedrooms, a kitchen, and even a swimming pool. Women's names and independence. The hard lot of Roman women. Ancient Roman women did not have personal first names. They received only their clan name, gene's name. For example, Julia, if born into the genes Julia. If a family had several daughters, additions like secunda, second, tertia, third, and so on were appended to their genes' names. Life as a woman in ancient Rome was generally challenging. They had almost no rights within marriage. Nevertheless, due to high infant mortality, the state rewarded Roman women for childbirth. Perhaps the most coveted prize for women was legal independence. If a free woman gave birth to 3 children who survived delivery, she was granted the status of an independent person. Bizarre beauty rituals and hygiene practices. Pliny the Elder mentions several health tips in his writings that are hard to take seriously today. Abrasions and bruises were treated with boar manure, collected in spring and dried. Fresh manure could also be used for this purpose. A patient's recovery was also believed to be aided by abracadabra. This incantation was first mentioned in the works of Cyrenius Simonicus, who lived in the 2nd century and was the physician to Roman Emperor Caracalla. The word was to be written on an amulet in a column 11 times, each time removing the last letter. Such an inscription was believed to gradually weaken the power of the evil spirit, i.e., the disease. If a woman wanted to be considered intelligent, she simply had to have thick, unibrow-like eyebrows. Roman women went to great lengths to achieve a unibrow and the status of an intellectual. They even glued artificial eyebrows made of goat hair to their faces, using tree resin as an adhesive. Such were the sacrifices made for beauty. But that's not even the strangest part. For washing clothes, Romans used human urine. Workers would fill vats with clothes and pour urine over them. Afterward, a person would climb into the vat and stomp on the clothing to clean it. Feasts and gluttony, a symbol of status and luxury. Social status was determined by how a family ate. Ordinary city dwellers mainly consumed olives and cheese, or simply porridge day after day. The wealthy, however, often hosted feasts and banquets to display their status. The parties of the Roman aristocracy are legendary for their excessive, hypertrophied indulgence. They didn't sit at tables but reclined on dining couches. Spending the day in idleness was a prerogative of the upper class. They even introduced the tradition of inducing vomiting during banquets. According to Seneca, Romans at feasts would eat until they simply couldn't fit anymore, then vomit to empty their stomachs and continue eating.